Best guess is that China only has 1.3 billion people now. The population probably peaked more than 10 years ago. And by 2030, there will be more retirees than workers. And by 2050, the entire population of China will have dropped below 650 million. The combination of the American security umbrella plus globalization has changed the way we lived. It's allowed everyone to benefit from global trade. Before we had that, if you didn't have oil locally, you didn't have transport fuel. If you didn't have coal locally, you didn't have electricity. If you didn't have good food locally, you didn't have a population.
In his 2022 book titled The End of the World is Just the Beginning, American geopolitical analyst and author Peter Zeihan draws attention to a disturbing phenomenon that no one is talking about, the end of globalization as we know it today. Zeihan explains that the global scale trade, which has been sustaining nations and expanding since 1945, is rapidly coming to an end. According to the geopolitical strategist, this would have grave consequences, including food shortages and the collapse of long-range transport and international supply chains. One must ask, why is a system that has sustained and united the world for decades suddenly in danger? According to Peter Zeihan, the reason is no other than a rapid decline of a particular demographic. The renowned author explains that adults have had fewer children over the past 7 decades, largely because those generations of adults consider the task of procreating less rewarding than the generations before them. As a result, the world's demographic pyramid, formerly richly supported by growing children at the base, now resembles more of a V-shape with more retirees and working-class adults than children. This disturbing phenomenon, according to Zeihan, is of great concern as it not only determines the future of many countries. It is also rapidly ending globalization. In addition, baby boomers, one of the largest generations ever, are retiring in thousands daily. The result of all this is the rapid destruction of global consumption. And when consumption is destroyed, so does global trade, with all the resources that come with it. Welcome to Savvy Economists. In today's video, we examine Peter Zeihan's thoughts on global demographic and economic collapse and the deep correlation between both. We will now take you to Zeihan's interview. Please watch, like and share the video. Also, ensure you subscribe to the channel and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
Globalization, safe globalization, enabled anyone to trade anything that they could produce, even if it wasn't a commodity, and join the system. It was like everyone had won World War II all at once. It's been a great ride, and now it's ending. So first of all, when globalization really got going in the 50s, we started moving off the farms and into the cities to take manufacturing jobs. Now, when you live on a farm, kids are free labor. You have a whole scat of them. But when you move into a condo, kids are just really loud, expensive, mobile pieces of furniture. And adults aren't idiots, so we had fewer. You play that forward for 70 years. And it's not that we're running out of children. That happened 40 years ago. It's that we're running out of mature adults. And so the economic model of globalization is consumption-based, and it just doesn't work without people. So we've always known we were going to get here in the end. It just happened. The Americans forced the issue. At the end of the war, we told everyone that we would patrol the global oceans so that anyone could send any cargo ship anywhere to trade in any product with any partner. That's what made globalization work. Now, we didn't do this because we were nice. We didn't do this because it was a trade program. We did this as a bribe. This is what we gave everyone so that they would join us against the Soviets. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1992. So Americans have been electing ever more isolationist and populist leaders ever since. So for you to believe that globalization can continue, you have to believe that A, it doesn't require consumption anymore, and B, that the Americans will continue to bleed and die so that the Chinese can get energy. That's a bad bet. So think of your demographic profile as a pyramid. Children on the bottom, retirees at the top, mortality built it into a pyramid. As we industrialized and urbanized, it became more of a column and then eventually an inverted V with more mature adults than children. In 2019, was the last year before the baby boomers really got into retirement in a big way. So we had this massive post-war generation throughout the Western world that were all, on average, 63. So they hadn't retired yet. and all of their investments and all their retirement savings were churning along, providing capital for the whole system. We still had a huge amount of consumption out in the world. But you fast forward 3 years, this year on average they turn 66. So it's over. We've lose their consumption, we lose their investment. They have to liquidate all their stocks and bonds and go into T-bills and cash because they won't have the ability to recover from a crash. And we're also seeing some of the fastest demographic aging in human history throughout the developing world, with China being the far most advanced. So we're losing the investors, we're losing the workers, we're losing the consumers all at the same time. On top of that, we had Trump, and we had COVID, and now we've got Biden, and then we had Brexit, and everything that used to tie it all together has been broken apart either on purpose or just because of the strategic trends that were already in play. We're never going back. What's happened is that countries who joined globalization in the second wave in the 1990s, mostly the developing world, they urbanized and aged out much faster than the rich world did. So when we hit 2015, that big chunk of developing world workers, the experienced workers, the productive workers, the ones who saved, they're now moving into retirement. We're losing their money, we're losing their skills. But because the developing world is aging so much faster, they're moving into their 40s and their 50s, but they haven't been able to build up the skill set because their systems were not as established. But their birth rates dropped faster than the West's did. So they actually have lower birth rates in many cases than most of the advanced world. So we've lost children on both sides of the ledger. And now our new mature workers just don't have the skill set to keep it up. And even if they did, they wouldn't have anyone to sell to. Healthcare, medicines, fertilizers. It's very easy for me to see a lot of these countries facing famine in the not too distant future, because if you break down globalization, yes, that means it's difficult to get oil or manufactured goods. I'm more concerned about agriculture. Agriculture is by far the most delicate and vulnerable of the economic sectors because it needs the equipment, it needs the finance, it needs the fertilizers, it needs the trade options. You break any of those, the whole system falls apart. I don't want to say that unchecked population growth is necessarily the way to go. That's not what I'm after here. I mean, you require a balance between children, young workers, and mature workers. If you don't have enough mature workers, you don't have the capital. If you don't have enough young workers, you don't have the consumption. If you don't have the children, you don't have a future. China is already out of those last two categories. And so we know where this leads. It leads to zero. This is a very broad array of countries. It's very difficult to make a generalization. They've started to industrialize. And so they're going down the same path that everybody else did. And the first step of that path is lowering infant and child mortality. And so when 1 out of 3 children don't die, you have an explosion in your birth rate. But if you play that forward 10, 15 years, then you start having adjustments in family planning and you get smaller and smaller families as urbanization kicks in. The danger for countries that are in this category who've taken the first but not the second step is that they've imported a lot of the technologies of industrialization, which has helped them out, but they have not developed the systems to sustain that themselves.
According to the United Organizations, the world's population is growing at a much slower rate than it did in the last 7 decades. In 1952, the world's population stood at 2.5 billion. It has now grown to an astounding 8 billion, but experts predict that we will only have added 2.5 billion more people by 2092. In 2021, the international organization also noted that 60% of the world population lived in countries that were at or below the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. In 2019, it was just 40%. Net immigration also continues to worsen the population decline in certain areas while only narrowly circumventing population decline in other areas. And at the crux of it all is the end of global trade as we know it. What do you think about Peter Zeihan's assessment of global demographic and economic decline? Please drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Also, ensure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more related videos. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm, so we can continue to grow the channel. Thanks for watching.